Hello, and welcome to On Point, a podcast by Oak Street Funding where we sit down with industry leaders to bring insights to the topics you want to hear about. I'm your host today, Adam Farrig, Vice President of Strategic Markets at Oak Street Funding. And let's get on point. Today I'm joined by Ben Phillips and Cody Rivers. Ben is Director of IT Risk and Advisory Services at KSM CPAs and Advisors, and Cody is Managing Director at Reveal Risk. And today we're going to be discussing cybersecurity for M&A. Ben and Cody, thank you guys for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So we're going to dive right in. To start, what trends in cybersecurity do you guys see emerging over the past several months, and what trends do you see going forward?
Awesome. Well, the trends, I think there's no shortage of news articles on attacks, breaches, ransomware. I think there's a lot of corporate companies, a lot of companies in general trying to get their hands around a strategy of how to approach this. I think there's been a lot of spending historically on cyber, but there's still some like alignment to be done there. So there's staying up on trends, having a strategy, knowing what your posture is internally. I think there's a lot of trend, a lot of focus on a clear cyber strategy that you could talk about amongst leaders and folks that just aren't in cyber right to you.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of AI-powered attacks. A continued prevalence of vendor attacks, so software vendors. Organizations have been implementing more of a zero trust security framework, which is essentially never trust, always verify a device that's accessing the network. So I think those are a couple of things that are happening right now.
For the future, I think, to your point, I mean, AI technology is evolving quickly. Deepfake's an example. You see a lot of that's gone up, 4-digit percentages in the past 2 years because what I can do on my new iPhone that was released the other week. And so I think that enables attacks, and then social engineering, and with AI and everything, I think it just makes every attack, it makes it easier. And then the fortunate news is the good guys have to be right every time. The bad guys need to be right one time.
Yeah, it's a good point. So, as we kind of segue into M&A, how do you evaluate cybersecurity, that's in place for a company that you're looking, or that one of your clients is looking to acquire? How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, great question. So I think in general, the triad in cyber is people, process, and technology. I think technology is more mature. It's evolving. There's a lot of focus on. I think people and process are the two that are not quite there. I think that's kind of where we like to focus and think that there's not been as much focus as some. And again, process isn't the sexiest part of cyber, right? It's paper, documentation, governance, the thing that often is left behind. So a lot of things I think to focus on are like, is it documented? Is it repeatable? Does everyone in the organization know what to do? And are the people trained on even know where to find that process?
Yeah. And I would say, like, in your typical transaction life cycle, it's a lot of data of things that have happened in the past and someone's evaluating it. So think of like, the financial diligence, right? You get revenue metrics, AR metrics, general ledger information, a bunch of stuff that you don't need a policy or it's not based on theory or thought. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
And we can do KPIs against that information. With cyber, when you're doing it, I would say it's pretty important to make sure you ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Some can be point blank. Are you aware of any security incidents you've had in the last 6 months?
Mm-hmm.
What about the last 3 years? So asking a lot of those questions, asking leadership's tone at the top as it relates to cybersecurity, asking the folks that are responsible for security, do you have policies that you follow, or are they just policies that you have because you have to have them?
Mm-hmm.
I can get a lot more just from like a 10-minute conversation with someone than I can get from like spending a bunch of time reviewing a bunch of stuff and asking. You just got to ask the point blank questions, because at that point, they're in diligence. They have to be accurate. If not, I'm sure someone's going to sue them. On the cyber side, there's quite a few, like, aside from people process, there's some easy buttons you can hit from a tooling perspective. You can use asset discovery tools. You can use information to identify past breaches. I would ask them about their vendors, vendors that are mission critical as it relates to third-party risk management. I would ask them what regulatory in compliance things that they've agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
So think of contracts, SLAs, things like that. Like, sometimes during the diligence, they're not weeding through all of. I mean, granted, if 35% of the business is made up of 3 clients, then they're going to kill those 3 client contracts. But 65% is a bunch So really making sure like what's your 5-year plan? Are you gonna go get 3 more big whales over the next 2 years to meet your numbers, or are you gonna do something more scalable and make on 65%, 78%?
Yeah.
So I would say really checking to make sure what the organization has agreed upon.
Yeah, I think to your point too about like asking someone when looking at a company, it's like, is it written? My thing is it written down? Because I want to ask, is it Tom in IT? But Tom's like, I've been here for 20 years and this is what I do, but like no one else knows. And so
Right.
if Tom goes on vacation, what happens? If Tom's not here, or Tom, was just gone for a few months, or he just came back. So I think those things give you kind of like the level of depth. And then again, the supporting documentation can support that. I know, and again, in diligence, you don't get a lot of time. So you got to kind of get in, ask a few questions to give it an idea. And then if it moves past diligence, into, now we're going to look into integration or close,
Yeah.
then get more time.
So for you folks doing M&A out there, this stuff trickles all the way down, this continuity and succession planning and having checks and balances in place as it relates to working with your clients. It also it relates as it works, for your IT and your cybersecurity and everything else. So it kind of goes all the way through. So as we're talking about those vulnerabilities, when you're going through a deal, how do you guys help identify issues as you see them and unreported data breaches or cyber incidents when you're a consultant for a buyer?
Sure. So I think in our side, like we do a lot of these. So it's muscle memory. We know it. We've seen a lot of different situations. So in other areas, it may be a company's first time acquiring another firm, second, or they do a lot too. But oftentimes the questions to ask. I mean, you're an auditor, you know this question. Ask what the auditor asks. You don't, offer up any additional things. And so it's knowing those questions to ask to say, what may give me a peek under the covers or to know what may be done. You mentioned here, hidden vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
That's sometimes you can look at like even over to like the balance sheet or something of when they last had a big capital expenditure. Was this 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? So how old is this equipment? That kind of tells you about the life cycle management. So there are things like that to ask. And the really role of a third party or a consultant is to bring that like very pointed SME. I think of that like parable about like you can pay someone to hit thing one time and it's more expensive,
Yeah.
but you get the first time. You can spend a longer time in diligence. As you know, time is money. It's like, hey, I need to get the information right away and get it back to the powers that be.
Yeah, and I would say also, even if it's, we've done some of these that are 8 hours long, some of these that are 60 hours long. It really depends on like what level of comfort does management want to get with these different matters they want to figure out. But I would say at the very beginning is from a consultant side, having a good list of questions that you've gone through with, if it's through the private equity fund or the broker or the I'm going to mess up all the different terms, but right, there's private equity fund, there's a company acquiring a business. Sometimes there's an intermediary like a broker.
Yeah.
What's the term of that?
Investment banker.
Investment banker. Yeah. So a lot of times when we're working with an investment banker, they're representing the organization purchasing the company and making sure that we have a clear alignment on like, this is the stuff you want us to ask about. Mm-hmm. This is the stuff that you want to know. And really, they're not experts in this stuff, but we can, ask those proper questions to identify like what red flags are there. I think it's important when you start at the tone of the top when you're talking to IT, like, hey, you got to be separately, like you got to tell them what they ask. There's no hiding things here. Like, this has got to be all on the table. And I think if you just ask the right direct questions, you'll be able to say like, have you ever had a breach recently? Well,
But
define.
Yeah. Right.
Do you have an incident response program? Well, define. So I think really just asking very pointed questions from someone that knows what they're talking about or can identify what could be an issue. And I think from the consultant side, you're not trying to be like a gotcha person. You're just trying to get the facts.
Well, yeah. So many of our clients that are, maybe smaller in this sense that, are growing and don't have a full-time staff of, that do this type of consulting work, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. And there's not like, just because you say no or we don't do that is not a bad thing. It's just accurate.
Right.
Like, it's just the nature of the business. It's why you're being sold at this point in time, not like with 60 people versus 195 people. Well, different things happen.
Yeah.
I would say from tools and technology, again, you can use systems and tools to track assets, passwords, different things like that.
But your point, or you're saying it too, is like build a playbook, have a methodology and an approach, so you're not just off the cuff. And I think that knocks out a lot of the risk right there. Just following it so you don't get in the moment and then just kind of say, oh, I think we're good.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that can be pretty efficient if you have a proper playbook and say, hey, I need 3 meetings to talk about these things.
Yep.
If you want us to, and based on these responses, the client can have us dig further in certain things or check stuff if they want us to.
And do this audit on your own firm too. I think you do this on your own firm. It's a lot easier from a buy side perspective to go out and ask those things of targets that you do.
Yeah.
Actually, the sell side. I mean, I think of like the
Yeah.
spring baked diet, right? Like, hey, how can I look good? Rope down. What are things I should
That's
do?
what you really
Do the long-term things, but I mean, do the long-term stuff. But on the sell side, I think it's important to say, what are they going to be looking for? Because it's the same
Yeah.
question.
Exactly.
For sure. So, now that we've moved past, getting into M&A, let's talk about valuation, right? So how can cybersecurity risks impact the valuation of a company during an acquisition?
This I think is probably one of the biggest unknowns in a lot of things, because regulation and compliance is such a fast evolving area that oftentimes the people that are doing the diligence aren't, if they're up to speed on the requirements, they may not catch it. And I'll give you an example.
I'm going to write down some of these for my own.
Awesome. So an example here is like CMMC. It just, again, it got codified just recently, and that's the government side on so with the DoD contracts. If a buyer is getting a target company that may have DoD contracts and they need to be compliant to CMMC, if they acquire that entity, the entire company now has to be under that to then satisfy those contractual requirements. And so that is not a cheap process. And so it's documentation, process, or compliance. So those are things when you're buying this company for X revenue, X talent, and as you acquire that company, you now have to either mature or make sure you meet the compliance requirements in that contract to maintain that revenue stream. And
So for those of us on the webinar that don't understand the acronym so much, can you break down the acronyms a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, great. So CMMC is the government or DoD certifying body for like NIST 800-171, which is a framework for NIST. But CMMC is just a certification or a compliance framework on the government side.
Okay.
There's other ones there's Ben knows those, and there's high trust. There's ones on the healthcare side. There's so that's just an example, but there's quite a few that are dependent on customer contracts will require that, and that's probably the most important part.
As it would relate to like financial services or, a wealth advisor, a CPA, or an insurance business that's working with highly confidential information of their clients, valuations are a hot topic in all three of those verticals.
Mhm.
How do you think that cybersecurity risks or problems could impact the valuation of a financial services firm? And again, I'm not going to hold you to it.
Sure.
I'm just curious for my own.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I would say thinking about the different regulations that they have to comply with. So, for example, the FTC safeguards rule or other requirements that they have to comply with. If the acquiring firm knows that one of two things, are they going to let this firm operate as themselves and not mess with IT too much?
Mm-hmm.
And do they feel that the way they are ran is in alignment with the regulatory requirements that they have to operate in? Then there should be no additional, you can keep budget as budget if they're doing what they should be doing.
Okay.
But if they know that they're not, or if they're planning to pull them in, then they're going to have to estimate what are the expenses we're going to have by either pulling them in, which should be already known costs, but on the cyber side, what's going to be the level of effort of getting them up to par?
Which could affect your bottom line, which your multiple
they're using-
derive from.
Yeah, so if they're using a bunch,
Paying revenue.
if they're using a bunch of legacy systems and nobody has to use MFA and everybody just never changes their password and they never do backup and they don't really, they kind of work off the cuff because they're a growing organization,
Yeah.
then that will be a culture shock to a lot of folks within IT, but also within the organization.
Exactly. I'm playing the investment immediately post closing. You do plan on it, which affects and that number.
Heavily affects cash flow and valuation.
When you do a little holdback.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the biggest challenges or risks with cybersecurity during a transaction?
I think ownership, and again, based on the size, sometimes if they are within a TSA or not, or a transition services agreement, sometimes at close, ownership is very clear. It's over and done with. Other times, the acquiring entity, there may be a large amount of stuff that needs to be transitioned. So during a TSA, defining who owns what, who's responsible for what during this time of transition, ERP implementation or migration. If a breach does happen, something does happen, whose responsibility is it? Is it the target company still owns it? Is the acquiring company, are they responsible for it? how do the teams work together? What's the PR? What's the comm side? What's the insurance implication? So I think some of that is navigating ownership and responsibility of incidents that could pop up and being clear. So when the incident happens, you're not developing that idea then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hidden breaches, so breaches that you don't know about, breaches that the organization doesn't know about, integration gaps. So the cost of integrating IT, cyber on one kind of playbook, vendor evaluations. Both companies use different vendors. The acquiring company may have a certain vendor that makes their secret sauce. Well, in a world where large organizations don't want two vendors that do the same thing, someone's going to have to drop the vendor.
Okay.
So that can add operational risk.
Yeah,
For sure. Transaction. Overall, different security cultures. You may have one organization that, is from a scale of 1 to 10, they're 6, which means like they have the right tone. They may not have the right budget, but they're trying to do the best that they can. But you may have one organization that's like a 3, where they don't have the budget, they don't have the personnel, and they're just doing what they can to do their business.
Which is probably common in M&A. Usually have very lopsided. That kind of gets into the next question of, what are the best practices for integrating two completely different IT and security infrastructures? And a lot of M&A transactions, you probably see one up here and one down here, vice versa. You don't see a lot of the same, right?
Yeah.
I always say assess yourself before you wreck yourself, because you, to your point, you've got to have like a clear understanding of what the gaps are. And then I think of like a RACI chart, or RACI, which is like responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And so every piece of that, who falls in those columns, because to your point, there's so much going on. I've got to have clear who owns this, who's responsible for driving it, who's consulted in the decision, and then who do we inform once the decision is made. And so I think like it's go slow to go fast, but that's on the integration plan. This is not what you do in diligence.
Right.
But in that time, going very slow, methodical, because again, you're affecting revenue. The reason this company was bought was to produce revenue, to have some kind of product. And once the papers are signed, the clock starts then to start either producing said revenue or getting the integration done. So having that stuff defined up front. And so then when you're execution, you can go as fast as possible with minimal margin of error.
Yeah. I would probably also add to that, like on the cybersecurity or security side of integrating the two organizations from a cultural perspective, do yourself a favor. Just pick one framework. The framework that most aligns to everyone, because when organizations say they're doing a hybrid, or we're doing a couple things that can't be judged. I'm doing CrossFit. I'm doing I'm going to the gym on my own, and I'm also doing this. Well, at the end of the day, like you're 30% doing each of them.
Yeah,
So
correct.
pick a measurable framework that both organizations, collectively the whole organization, can align from, at least to start. Training your folks, training your employees.
It's a people business. If the people don't do it, you can put as much tech you want in place. It's not going to work.
I think it's important also to ask for feedback. So you may, knowing the different cultures of the organization, organization B may need more support than organization A. You also sometimes see, this is also when you're doing mergers of like equal sizes, you see a lot of transformation on both sides.
Yeah.
So then it's like management, and then you have, one group, and you just acquired a 40% size, like, 60%, 40%, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is going to have transition. So really think that out and don't overrush it.
Yeah. So, we talk about people and how they relate to this. How difficult is it to get buy-in from employees, and how do you deal with pushback for people that don't want to change in those situations like you're talking about immediately following an acquisition?
It's a big thing. It's very tough. Everyone's got their own jobs. And I think we call it a lot of times like organizational change management, or OCM. And it's having an established OCM strategy. And that's not so much about, it's cyber and IT are usually the ones, but there's other cultural things. And it's like, what is my way to disseminate this information to the workforce in a meaningful way that's effective and can be comprehended quickly. And I think it's, again, being clear on the why and the how, and the, with them, what's in it for me type thing. But we say that with anything IT, or especially in cybersecurity, you're asking additional effort from somebody. Got to be clear on why we're doing this, how they can do it efficiently, and where they can get more information. So just an effective OCM strategy.
I like it. And I would also say probably just making sure that there's active leadership support in what you're doing.
It's got to start from the top.
It needs to be on both sides. So it can't be like, well, we're doing this. Like, even in small coffee shops, like, yeah, we're doing this, got to do it. Unfortunately, going to cost us a bunch of money, but whatever, we just got to do it. Like, that's not strong support.
Yeah.
This is more like, no, if we don't do this, we can't keep growing. or if we don't do this, something bad is going to happen to where we're going to look very poorly in front of our clients, and that's going to trickle down to why someone may not want to work with us in the future. Yeah, I think as you said, adding to that, listening for feedback, providing training, and training can look different for different folks. And probably what a lot of people don't do is reward compliance. So whatever way that looks like, rewarding that. Yeah, a little Starbucks gift card. Just something that makes people, reward compliance.
Well, you incent based on what you want to see. It's like anything
Yep.
else, right?
Yeah.
Can either you walk us through an example of a deal, an M&A deal that somebody did it right and how it should be done?
Yeah, I think every deal is going to have nuance or challenges. It's how you address challenges, and I think reset or set realistic expectations. I think the challenge sometimes I see that when it goes right is X challenge has been uncovered. We discussed a plan for it. We have reset the goal line or what's going to happen, and we communicated expectations accordingly. Instead of call it a November 1st date, now it's a December 2nd first date. Now it's December 1st. May not be happy that it got delayed, but we have no challenges, no disruptions to business. And so I think it's clear communication, setting realistic goals, and then measurement against that so that everyone knows what's going on. Because I've never seen a deal where it just runs through with no bumps at all. There's always something.
Yeah.
The challenge I see sometimes with people and it doesn't go right is they try and jam it or squeeze it in. Something goes wrong in the end, and then they're like, I would have much rather just push back 2 weeks or a week. It had to go smooth than try and jam it a week before. For sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
I would say did some sort of IT or cyber diligence, so they had the facts they needed to have before they signed the pieces of paper. From integration, they didn't just do it on day one. They planned for it tactically with different feedback. After integration, made sure there was clear communication as it relates to like, when do we align policy? When do we align cybersecurity posture? When do we align? What does that roadmap look like? And not just throw it on someone's list. All right, go do this. Because it does involve a lot of different stakeholders: operations, IT, HR, finance. If the organization feels like they budgeted and they were aware of the relevant information that they had to have to make the next 2 years well or operate smoothly, and they didn't lose a lot of personnel because of surprises, then the deal went well, right?
Yeah.
But if not, then there's always things that happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys both for being here. I'm sure our viewers learned a lot. I know I did. So really appreciate it.
Thanks for having
us.
Thank you all for listening to On Point, a podcast by Oak Street Funding. I'm Adam Farrig, and tune in next time wherever you listen to podcasts as we get on point. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, like, subscribe, and leave a review.